Hello and welcome to the Distillery. I'm your host, Harry Lee Shanglun. Today we have special guest, Cynthia Spleen. Hey Cynthia, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
So good to have you on. I'm so excited to chat with you about all manner of things. Cynthia,
Yeah.
you are a tattoo artist, visual artist, a musician, a performer, uh, a, like gender punk,
Mm-hmm.
cursed dandy, self-proclaimed
Mm-hmm.
tender bitch. I love
Mm,
all of
mm,
these.
mm,
How
mm.
do you relate to all of these terms and labels, and how did you find yourself there?
Um, yeah, there's a lot of labels there. But let's focus on Tender Bitch first of all. I really gravitate to that quite juxtaposed terminology because I feel like it's kind of like a self-awareness within being assertive in a otherwise, you know, hard world, uh, but also just being very sensitive and a real soft boy. um, but yeah, in terms of like the professions, I guess that I do, like tattooing, visual artist, muso, and stuff. Um, yeah, I feel like uh, I do a lot, and I barely finish things. I'm just sort of I feel like I'm like this Cthulian, spreading my creative tendrils willy nilly and slapping people in the face with it. Um, and uh, but it feels nice. Like it feels like I'm always kind of just undulating and working towards like whatever I'm thinking or feeling in the moment. And it is quite nice to finish things occasionally. Um, but I think tattooing kind of affords me that in the sense of like, it's like a regimented type of job, and I definitely do finish tattoos. Uh, yeah. And the cursed dandy thing is kind of like, I feel quite anachronistic, like my mind's it's kind of preoccupied with lots of old world things, but I'm in the cyber streams and I am oversaturated with modern day life. So it feels a bit cursed in that regard.
I like that, like trapped in the in between, or having
Yes,
to
very
deal with
much
the
so.
because it feels like there's a paradox there, right? In being anachronistic and wanting the old and being assaulted in some senses by the modern,
Mm,
but then also recognizing like history has not been kind to people of color here in
mm, mm.
Australia and elsewhere in the West.
Absolutely. And yeah, like dandyism especially is obviously quite a white Elizabethan type preoccupation. um, but I quite like that juxtaposing of, classically white archetypes. And I'm very aware of like visual cues and things, especially with like fashion and what kind of connotations, associations that they might have, and like playing with that when you mix it with someone who looks like this, racially ambiguous, with like a mohawk, not a wig. I'm wearing a wig right now, but yeah, just like all these like different visual cues and how they kind of there's a bit of an alchemy that happens, I think, with all these different points, you know.
Totally. And
Mm,
I mean, you are somebody who thinks very carefully about fashion and personal expression through aesthetic and appearances. And
mm-hmm.
your work is incredibly vibrant and kind of in many ways pastiche. I feel like it draws, as you mentioned, elements from all different eras, Elizabethan ruffs mixed with almost like clown-like accentuated features kind of makeup.
Yeah.
Where do you get your inspiration, and what are you trying to achieve with your aesthetic?
Um, I, mm, the achieving thing I think is mainly like every day I wake up and I'm like, yeah, what do I feel, and how's the best way to kind of visually pay homage to that, I guess. I like to think of paying homage to it rather than being like, how do I want that to look, or what does that look like? I don't know. It's kind of like you're offering something to whatever internal framework is happening that day, I guess. um, yeah. Wait, can you tell me the question again? Sorry.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like what inspires, I guess, or
Oh, yes. Yeah.
motivates or energizes? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I've always been really, really obsessed with like I can trace my life through all the different things I've been obsessed with, particularly with fashion. Like I remember like my sort of 50s like rockabilly housewifey type phase, and then I remember like the dark cabaret, like cobblestone streets, accordions, my makeup things, and like I can really trace my life quite easily that way. And at the moment, I feel like I'm not obsessed with like one specific thing, and it's reached this quite interesting like point where everything is existing at once. And um yeah, that's yeah, an interesting one. But anyway, in terms of inspiration, I am just obsessed with things all the time, and it kind of always reflects back into whatever appearance I'm making. So at the moment, like I think I'm quite obsessed with just researching like religions and like Hinduism and archetypes and like Carl Jung and all that kind of stuff. Um, and I really like the idea of yeah, I guess taking whatever I'm percolating in that regard, and again, yeah, juxtaposing it to like real world settings. I really like the idea of looking like a character, like as if I'm just like a time traveler. I don't do it purposefully, it just ends up happening. But like a lot of people have remarked that it feels that way when they're kind of walking around with me. They're like, you look like a video game character, like this crack in reality type of thing. um, yeah.
That connects to your bio, where you're like going off into and maybe your Cthulhian tentacle imagery at the start. Your multi-dimensional limbs reaching out into the ether, bringing back the neon fruits.
Yes, that's it.
So I like that
Technicolour.
glitch in reality.
Mm.
And how do people respond to this glitch in reality?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I It's quite interesting because I have moved around a little bit, and seeing how people react to you differently, you know, wherever you are. Um, it's Yeah, I can learn a lot from places based on that. For instance, you know, if I'm traveling around the world, it's yeah, like for instance in Berlin, you know, I don't feel like a spectacle there, but I've also lived in Cairns where I would wear like gothic Lolita Victorian dresses and like massive goth boots in far North Queensland heat. Super impractical, but I was just like, I must do it. My heart tells me I must do it.
Yeah.
I
What is
will
it? This is like,
suffer.
this is what you're offering to yourself on that day. You're offering yourself
Yeah.
heat stroke.
Yes, exactly. We all must suffer for our passion. But
That, I mean, that is the
yes.
word passion, right? Suffering.
um yeah, so yeah, it's yeah, in Cairns,
Sorry, I
I
interrupted you.
definitely
So yeah,
get
you're in Cairns.
no,
Yeah.
it's okay, it's okay. I'm amazed that I could actually remember my train of thinking. Um yeah, in Cairns it was definitely like I was hyper aware of how much of a spectacle I was. And I had to kind of psych myself into um still going ahead with it. Like I would have to disassociate a bit and wear headphones all the time, and you know, try and go into my own little world when I'm outside, because being so aware of it, it was like a lot. It was very anxiety inducing, um, and it still is to some regard. But Melbourne is really nice in the sense that there is some sort of socially acceptable permissibility of looking a bit strange, um, for lack of a better phrasing. Um, and yeah, I some people are nice. Some people are very like treat you like a spectacle, you know, like they think, oh, I can touch you, and you know, you feel like they don't actually see you as a person necessarily. They see you as like a some other, in which there's different rules that apply. um,
Mm.
and yeah, in the realms of, you know, being like a person of color as well, you don't really know how that's feeding into just an aesthetic, looking, you know, quite eccentric, and how much that is feeding into their spectacle of you as a person of color as well, type of thing. It's very interesting. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. As you were talking about this, the thing that came to mind was the notion of like visibility, the hyper
Mm,
visibility of being a person of color in white Australia.
mm,
And
mm,
for me, as an Asian person, you know, part of so-called model minority, I benefit in some ways from an invisibility, or from like
mm,
being incognito and indistinguishable, so to speak, right? That's the old joke. All the Asians look the
yeah.
same. But I
Mm,
kind of
mm,
do feel that way, and I can blend in as a result, and kind of keep my head down. It's so
mm,
interesting to me that you're saying you have to psych yourself up, and even though you may be feeling anxiety around it, you made the choice to be hyper visible on top of being a person of color, of, you know, ambiguous
mm.
race, but certainly not white. Um,
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
I'm lagging
totally.
tremendously. So yeah, there was not really a question
It's
there. It was just a
yeah,
random
it's definitely something
comment.
I think about. That's okay. That's um yeah, the politics of it is definitely something ongoing, I think. Uh, yeah. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. I'm just lagging tremendously. I'm still
Alright.
enjoying. Oh, maybe you can't hear me anymore.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
well, go on. So I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Sorry, we're
Yeah.
just like staring at each other and be like, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Sorry.
That's okay.
This is going to be
It's all
great because I'm not going to edit
good.
it out. It's just going to be part of it. So yeah, there was no real question there, but it was just like that's what that reminded me of. And I wondered whether you had thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. You know, it is really like kind of painting a big X on you in some ways. And for instance, like sometimes if I'm going to a new city, like around the world, I'll actually Google if that place is quite racist, or like what is the general vibe of, you know, queerness and things. You know what I mean? And that's like that's pretty
Yeah.
hefty thing to do. But it is really to get a sense of like almost what I can get away with and the risk attached to it, and if I'm willing to risk that. And yeah, all these kind of yeah, logistics. Um,
And
but I
yeah,
think
I mean,
it's
just,
sorry.
oh, sorry, go on. Nah, you go.
I was just gonna say like it is just so fucked to like try and gauge somewhere like how racist somewhere is before you get there. It's definitely not something I think a lot of people even think of uh of needing to do, I guess. So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, it's
continue.
totally a position of privilege to be able to just like travel to a place and assume that you're going to fit in, right?
Mm, mm, yeah.
Um, and I think what's interesting is the way that you don't fit in can also be different flavored, I think.
Mm, mm.
Um, at least that's been my experience. Like sometimes you don't fit in, but it's not like there's no marginalization aspect. It's just that you don't quite understand yet the culture, and you're just like therefore not part of that community, and that's fine. and then other times you don't fit in, it's because like there's an element of oppression. There are elements like structurally or actively working against you.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it does make you think a lot more, I guess, of the way people associate visually, and yeah, kind of build up more of a knowledge around, yeah, that people's perceptions, and how they relate to things from the past and things like that.
So speaking about like interrogating how we relate to the past, you've mentioned that for your looks, you're often connecting and maybe subverting things that are rooted in oppressive historical structures, like Elizabethan attire, dandyism. What's your approach there?
I guess it's a sense of autonomy, of like cultural autonomy. Make like It's a privilege for me to be able to walk around as an Elizabethan dandy in during the day and wear pants and things like, you know, things like that. I'm just quite aware of like that was such a long history of women and or femme presenting people at least, not being able to do that, and the kind of social connotations and ramifications of it, if they were to do that, and how, yeah, rooted in like patriarchal ideology it is, and like um it's kind of just trying to have fun with it, and just yeah, fucking with it basically.
It feels like an act of reclaiming or certainly subverting the power of that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
If people who are watching or watching later want to check out Cynthia's work, you should definitely check out their Instagram, which is @plasticmessiah. How did you choose that handle? Because it's an awesome handle.
Thanks. It is a line from an Angel Spit song. Angel Spit is like like a quite old now, I guess, Melbourne industrial goth band.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're a musician yourself, right? You're involved in music locally as well.
I mean, primarily in my room, but
very, very locally.
Yes. But yeah, it's been really, really fun to be making stuff during isolation, and I love making music. Like, I love singing, and the latest I've been delving a little bit into like making pop stuff, and usually I make quite sad indie type ballad things. But lately I've been making some pop tracks, and the most recent one I made was about my wanting to peg Daniel Radcliffe.
I had this first reaction like, I'm not sure if I heard that correctly, and then the second reaction was like, oh no, I definitely heard that correctly.
That was great.
And like
your reaction.
Yeah, talking about reactions of people.
Yeah.
Just like the first double check, and maybe this is a good time also to bring up this comment from Facebook by Monica, which says, Cynthia, you are very awesome.
That is one of the loves of my life, Monica.
Amazing. And you've mentioned that you've been making music in isolation, making pop songs, and how has isolation been for you creatively? Because you're somebody with so many different avenues of expression. Have those been curtailed or transformed?
Yes. It was actually really great because just before the plague hit, I was definitely in a bit of a creative rut. In a way, I was having a lot of not a great relationship with Instagram, which I still don't have a great relationship with Instagram. But yeah, I felt like it was really stifling my creativity and was just sort of warping my lens of sense of self within my creativity. Thinking of art in a sort of monetizing brand type way, and tattooing for nearly 6 years now, and having to engage with Instagram in that sort of way. Kind of having to make myself like addicted to it in some ways, um, to actually just keep up and like stay
Hmm.
buoyant on it.
Hmm.
Um, so I was really in that kind of headspace, like before everything really hit the fan, and it was a welcome relief to not have to think about that at all and not have to be maintaining, my business or my art through Instagram and thinking of it in that sense, and actually just making stuff and being like, maybe no one will ever see this. And that's interesting. That's like a really novel thought. You're like, oh wow, what if I never show this to anyone?
Yeah, totally.
Mm, mm,
It
mm,
sounds like, Instagram and many other platforms, they modify and capitalize our process, our creative process,
mm,
necessarily, and including our attention, and as you point out, like you kind of force yourself to be addicted to it so that you can feed the algorithm, so
mm,
that you can, do the business. Um,
yeah.
and so like, yeah, it sounds like you're saying that, the plague, which I love, by the way, another nice anachronism, enabled you to decouple your art from capitalism a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was very that. I was just like, fuck capitalism, and yay, I don't have to engage with capitalism. Huzzah! And then feeling like a deep reticence when things were going back to quote unquote normal. And being like, no, I don't want to have to do that again. And just feeling quite fearful that I would enter those kind of headspaces again, and not really knowing exactly how to maintain this like nice sense of freedom that I found again and was just sort of scratching the surface of, it felt.
Hmm.
And having to keep working, and like, I really don't want it to sound like I don't I'm not grateful for like tattooing and being able to make money off my art, because obviously that's fucking great. um but there is definitely a lot of logistics involved, I think, in terms of how you can preserve, that sense of um uh freedom in just being creative for the sake of being creative, rather than for others, or through seeing your art through the eyes of others, type of thing.
So can I ask, like, how, either like functionally or aesthetically, did that, I'm going to call it like moment of bliss, of freedom
Yeah.
from those constraints, affect your either creative process or outcomes? Like, did you find yourself changing style or genre or medium?
Yeah. I did start painting again, which I don't usually do because I'm very impatient, and I'm very really used to drawing. And drawing's very quick. It's very like instant gratification. Whereas painting, it's like laborious in the sense you got to wait for things to dry and blah blah blah, and it's just slow. It's so slow. So yeah, I painted this really massive painting that I kind of I wanted to just have something I could keep coming back to, that I didn't just finish in like one sitting, that I could just keep adding little things over the course of like 2 months. And um yeah, so that was really quite transformative, because obviously, every time I kept coming back to it, I would be in a different sort of headspace. I was still going down all these like rabbit holes of information of like, yeah, archetypal stuff, religion, that kind of thing. And so that would also feed into whatever I was like gonna do to the painting on that day. So it kind of just became this little feedback loop of all this like knowledge and then some sort of action to kind of reflect that knowledge in a way, and also just not really documenting too much about it, or posting like work in progress or whatever on my Instagram, like really just having it as like some sort of monk like sensibility of just, yeah, cool, let's keep going back and back and back, and who knows when it'll be done, and maybe it will never be done. And yeah, so that was really helpful for me to kind of get back to that sense of the kind of feeling I had when I was a kid, drawing, where it would just be like, there is no audience, like there is nothing else aside from just like what pleasure I'm getting from this activity.
I think that's a beautiful idea, and something that, I mean, I certainly would aspire towards, were it not for the different pressures. I think being able to fully enjoy the process of exploring something without any like fear, without any external validation necessary. Like, it sounds pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, the process is like the most vital bit, I think, and it gets quite swept under. And something I keep thinking of, that I read somewhere, was that you must enjoy the process, basically. I think of that a lot now. You must enjoy the process. But yeah.
That's the t-shirt. That's what we got.
Yep.
I feel like a lot of these distillery conversations, I end up with like a great t-shirt, and that's maybe the merchandising. This is the business line now. Like, that's how I make money. Now, we have maybe just to close us off, a question from Love Your Life, Monica, who has asked, "You are the most prolific artist I know," which is actually, yeah, something really true. You're constantly outputting some amazing things. I remember going to like gallery shows. You've been putting up like amazing painting art. And anyway, has it always been that way? Is that something that's been true of your artistic practice all the way through?
Yeah. Thanks so much for your question, Monica. I've always been drawing, always, like, obsessively. And when I was a kid, especially, I would just have sheets and sheets of paper, and I would like draw a film, I guess, in the sense of like, I would imagine it like a film. Say if I was introducing a character, I'd draw the full character, and then I would do like a slow pan, from the feet up, and imagine how it would look as a film, and and just be like humming this sort of character music, like sometimes they have like the slow pan and like this song to christen and personify the character, just stuff like that. So I would just like draw obsessively. So yes, I have always been doing too much.
And type this into the chat. Cynthia's answer: yes, I've always been doing too much. That resonates with me as well. Cynthia, it's been such a pleasure to have you on and chat with you about all things about aesthetics and visibility and Instagram and the process of creation. It's so good.
Thanks.
Final quote from wrong one. Hang on. Say from Monica. She says, "Mate, this is some genius. Love it."
Hell yeah.
Thanks, Cynthia. Take care.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Hey, thanks so much for joining and watching The Distillery, an online interview series. I'm your host, Harry Li Shanglun. We have episodes every day. Do check our website, distillery.site, or our Instagram at distillery.site, and Twitter at distillery_site to find out future guests and previous episodes. And until tomorrow, do take care.